Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. In today's episode, we'll be talking to my badass cousin, Veronica DeLane. We'll be talking about her previous experiences in the military to her present experiences of now being an ICU nurse. The conversation starts now.
Welcome to the Hobson Hour, the podcast where we explore the stories that shape our lives. Each week, your host, Justin Hobson, will sit down with a special guest and talk about the only things that really matter: family, friends, education, and the arts. So sit back and enjoy the ride here on the Hobson Hour.
Boom. Okay, so how's your day going?
Pretty uneventful. I literally just been kind
What
of
time do you
all day.
get back from work normally?
Honestly, it varies. It depends on if I run errands afterwards. So like running errands after work would be like somebody going to CVS or grocery shopping at like 9 at night. But since it's reversed for me, it's like 9 in the morning, and I'm like coming off of a graveyard shift. So sometimes it depends on if I do anything or if I'm at work late.
What kind of energy are we bringing into what store do you shop at?
What store do I shop at? Like
going to get groceries. Where would you go?
Oh, like Stop and Shop. Yeah, like
you get there. It's 9 a.m. What can we expect from Veronica DeLane?
So let me tell you a story, right? So they have those setups like those like scan yourself out checkout lanes, right? I'm coming out of work and I just happen to be wearing, I'm wearing scrubs, like the light blue OR pants, and I actually am wearing like an MGH Boston Strong shirt or something stupid, right? So I'm like definitely like advertising, hey, I'm a nurse.
Just so you know.
So I'm checking out this man, and I felt so bad for him. I mean, he probably was 90. I think he was 90. In fact, I think he said he was 90 years old. And I literally saw him, and I was like, oh, this dude's going down. Like, he just kind of like slowly, like, and he had like this big bag of ice or something. I can't remember, but it was a big bag of something. And he was like all like, tiny and like hunched over. And he just like kind of slowly like, no. And he just like tipped over. And honestly, I was like, oh, and everyone's like, oh no. And I thought for a second, I'm like, well, I'm out of here.
Everyone immediately just looked at you with your scrubs on. We're like, she knows what to do.
I was like, and I know, and I was like, thinking, I'm like, fuck, like I have to do something now. And it was actually like not too hard. Like I told the woman, I was like, have you ever? And she's like, oh, I used to. And then she threw in my face. She's like, I used to work as a CNA. I'm like, okay, so then you can help me, But she was honestly like super nice. It was, and we just kind of looped both of our arms underneath his armpits. It's kind of like a maneuver you can do, like if someone falls, like at the hospital or whatever. And so we just kind of picked him up and put him in a chair. And he was like pretty light anyways. And I was like, are you all right? And I was like, someone call 911. And so he's like, I'm 90 years old and I still do the grocery shopping. And I was like, oh, okay. And I'm like, how are you feeling? Are you feeling sick? And he's like, oh, it's not, I was feeling a little lightheaded. I feel better now. I'm like, I think you should have the ambulance just check. Cause he's like, I'm out of here. He was like driving. Like he up there. And I was like, I think you should wait. I was like, I think you should wait until the paramedics show up. We can at least see what your blood pressure is, what your blood sugar is. Like, is that okay? Let's just check, right?
Yeah.
What's gonna happen? So it was like mostly just trying to convince him to stay put while we waited for the ambulance. But it was like one of those moments where I was like, oh man, I have to get involved. Because I was like, like, what a douchebaggy move that would have been. I'm like, don't mind.
I can see someone in your industry like getting home or getting off a shift, and most people would probably be like, oh, okay, I gotta jump into action. I gotta do something, but I don't know what to do. Whereas you are probably like, I know exactly what to do, but do I want to do it?
Well, it's so funny because like if you talk to any like paramedic, nurse, anybody who is somewhere where they're off, right? They're just not at work. And someone's like, oh, like, we need help over here. 9 out of 10 times a person's going to be like, I don't want to get involved. But I don't have.
But why? Why is that? Is it because they're just so taxed from their day job? Yeah.
Yeah, because like it's work, you know. So anything relating to work, including saving lives, that you don't want to get involved in. You're like, no, I'm off. This is my off day.
Here's
I'm off
here's
today.
here's here's
You
the
know?
conversation that
No.
no one's having with new nursing students.
Yeah, no one tells you about the burnout. And
Look,
you're like,
you're
oh
gonna
no.
love your job
But
some days, but most days,
yeah, you're gonna love it. There's gonna be days where you really don't love
you
it.
just know that 90-year-old
But,
man is around the corner. Okay, so I like to kick things off. I don't even think I know your middle name, so I was wondering if you can just entertain me by giving me your full name.
Nicole Veronica. Oh, that's my middle name.
Yes, let's
We're off to a
go.
good start.
That's
I'm gonna take a
fine.
nap after this. Full name Veronica
Nicole
Nicole
DeLane.
DeLane.
Okay, that's interesting. Where did Nicole come
Yeah.
from?
Mom named me after, was it a cardinal? I don't know, someone in the church that Monsignor. And it was like his name was Nicholas, and so named me Nicole. And so it's spelled kind of funny. It's like Nichol, no E, which I got wrong all the time. Like, why is anyone judging me on this? Like, why? And mom's like, you've been spelling your name wrong. I think I must have been 16 years old. And mom's like, you're an idiot. And I'm like, why would I know that? Like, do I ever use it anywhere?
It's funny because my middle name is Matthew, and I had always seen it spelled with 2 T's. And so my whole life, I'm just like Matthew. And then one day my mom was looking at it and saying, son, Justin son. She always calls me Justin son. No, Justin son. It's 1 T. And I'm thinking to myself, this looks stupid. I guess I wasn't aware of how common it was because everyone I knew was with 2 T's. So I was maybe I was living a shelter life in regards to
or just like not knowing how to spell your middle name. Like, when do we ever? It's like cursive. It's going the way of Old Yeller. Like, what are we doing?
That's pretty. I mean, on any form that you sign, they usually don't ask you for the full name. It's like, hey, what's the middle initial? Okay, there it is. Okay, I want to jump into my first question, and it runs along with what we've already been talking about in terms of your occupation. So I've always been interested in your career choices because I look at it and I imagine myself in your shoes, and I would be super anxious and mildly stressed out because you started off in the military, and I believe you were a field medic in the military, and then you transitioned from that career after, I believe, 20 years. Is that right? You did a full 21 years. So you transition from all of those experiences, and I'm sure some people would be like, oh, I'm done with that. I'm going to go be a bank teller. But you said, no, I'm going to go be an ICU nurse, and I'm going to keep the train and the party going. I'm curious, is that a conscious choice, or was it just happenstance?
I think it was a little bit of both. How I got involved in the military, I was still in high school, and my mom was harping on me to join because I didn't have a whole lot of money to get to college, right? So all of this was like for college, right? And so, long story boring, she dropped me off at the armory, like as a surprise. She's like, "Oh, it's like, you know, I had no idea where we were going there." And I'm like, "I can't believe you did this."
Surprise!
But yeah. But then talking to the guy, he was talking about blowing stuff up. It was an engineer unit. And so he was like, oh, yeah, we're doing all sorts of. I'm like, oh, that sounds awesome. Like, I would also like to blow things up. So they're like, well, you can't. You're a female. I was like, well, what's the closest? What is the job that will put me standing next to the guy that's blowing the stuff up? And they're like, we can put you in as a medic. And I was like, sign me up, you know? So that's how it was kind of happenstance.
So they had gender policy on not being able to join an engineering unit when you went to sign up?
Oh, they literally just changed that, like, what, 2015? 2016? Yeah. I know. It's kind of like when you find out that women got the right to vote in 1920, and you're like, that wasn't really all that long ago. Like, you know, like, so it's kind of like when I tell that, people blow up, they're like, what? And I'm like, yeah, I know. It wasn't till recently that we could actually hold those MLS.
Now, I'm curious as to what influenced that policy choice, or to keep that differentiation, gender differentiation. Oh, sorry, you can't do that because you're women. Whoa, 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 oh my gosh, a woman's going to engineer something. I don't understand.
I know. I think a lot of it had to do with like combatant MOSs. So like if it was like anything as in terms of like combat related. So technically as a combat medic, I first enlisted as a 91 Bravo. But it went through a series of changes so that, you could have females as medics, Um, so they ended up blending a lot of different MOSs. Like there used to be like a hotel identifier. There used to be all sorts of things. So long story boring, it's like healthcare specialist, but males and females alike can be medics. However, so what they were talking about, like people that were combat arms were like field artillery. You'd have infantry. You'd have the combat engineers. Specific. If it was like the 12 Bravos, which are like the actual like staffer units, females couldn't be those, but females could be associated in different types of other engineer units that weren't combat related. Where you get hairy is when you get overseas and it's like more insurgency level fighting, so the front lines are blurred. So there are no real, when you get into the nitty gritty, when you start getting into the outposts too, like further out, that's when that was also an issue. They came up with all sorts of reasons, but in 2015, they opened it up to females. But with that said, they totally revised the physical fitness training program. So it used to be just 3 events, and it was totally like staggered or like scaled for males versus females. Like sit-ups were the same, but like there's a 3-minute differential between male and female runs. Things like that. But now the new PT is based on the type of MOS you have. So you have to meet those standards based on that MOS, and they've added it's like 6 events now.
Did you find when you first started, due to the differentiation gender-wise, that there was a higher influx of women medics compared to, I don't know, versus men being there or whatnot?
So honestly, I can only speak of the MOSs that were open to females. So I don't think it was necessarily different in terms of MOSs. I think what differentiated MOSs when you get into the nitty gritty part, like just speaking of solely which MOSs that female gravitate to, on a certain degree, it's based on your GT scores and your ASVAB scores at that point. So they've already done the physicality part of weeding out, when there were boundaries set. But I think after that point, it wasn't like who gravitated towards what MOS. It was like it was dictated by ASVAB and the slots that were needed for. Yeah, so you don't really get to choose your MOS. So I kind of got lucky, but my ASVAB scores
pretty solid,
pretty good.
Yeah.
So
I imagine you can't be in the medical field and have pretty low ASVAB scores. No.
Yeah. And in fact, when they were doing all these like changes, I was at our advanced individual training, the AIT. And so they were switching the 91 Bravo, I think, to 91 Whiskey when I went through. And so, and they were getting rid of the Bravo and the Charlie. And then they were switching it to 91 Whiskey with a hotel identifier or something crazy. Anyways, I know it's a long story and I know it's a lot of like mumbo jumbo, but they were finding people there that they didn't have high enough GT scores once the change went through, and they were getting reclassified. And one got reclassified as like a tent mender or like doing something with tents and supply. And I was like, what? Like, are you kidding me? She's like, I'm out of here. And I was like, oh my God. And everyone was just kind of alarmed, but I knew I was good, but I was like, God damn, that sucks. Like, suddenly it's like, you know what? You're not smart enough. So.
That's even after they had been already working in that field for a while.
No, like we were still in the EIT process. And if you fail the test like 3 times, like let's say you failed once, you get to take it again. And if you fail it that time, I think you get recycled. And if you fail the recycling, you get reclassified. So they definitely, you go through these programs and stuff, but I remember that was, so I don't think it matters as far as females gravitating towards one
based on your
like
score.
Based on your score at that
so
point.
the point being is make sure you study for your test or you're going to be putting up tents. No.
And that was like my introduction to medicine, to like learning
Yeah,
medicine.
yeah. So
So,
so you get in and you start doing your studying and your training for your MOS. And at what point in your career, or did you ever have a point in your career where you were kind of thinking, boy, this is kind of intense. The anxiety meter of having to be a clutch to someone in physical need. I mean, did that ever cross your mind at all, or was it transactional because your training was so intense that you didn't really think about it all that much?
honestly, I didn't really think about it all that much. I honestly, so it's funny. So I go through this training. It wasn't until I got back to my unit, and now I've always been National Guard. So I first
Hmm.
enlisted in Idaho, and we went to Boise to train, and it's like out in the middle of nowhere desert, right? Southern Idaho. And people were dropping for like heat casualties and, vomiting, stuff like that. Cause you're just out
Right.
in the desert. And they still have access if you pack. I mean, like some of these guys like packed like everything in the kitchen sink and were like, "Oh, we're going camping, kids." Like, okay,
Yeah.
some of the older ones. Um, and they had like soda and stuff, and so they'd be drinking that. And like, man, this guy's gonna go down. Like you'd have a heat pad or something, right? And I remember like giving IVs and like having like the commander, like, because everybody wants somebody like I've always said like nobody gives a shit about the medical branch until
Right.
there's a
Right.
medical issue, and then like everybody cares. So I felt like everyone was watching me just like start an IV, and like looking back, like whoopee you started an IV. But at
Right.
that moment, yeah, and I was like, I think I could
Mhm.
do this for a living. I think I
Yeah,
could do
yeah, yeah.
this,
Everyone in that around you probably
And
was, I don't know, a little bit more shocked, whereas you were kind of, business as usual, I suppose.
well, it wasn't. It was kind of funny because like they just told me like, hey, can you start an IV? And I was like, oh yeah, I can totally start an IV. I was like, sure. So I did that, and I mean like it wasn't a big thing, but like at the time, I think I
Yeah.
was 19 years old. And I was like a PV2 or something, and they like gave me an award at the end of the training period. I was like, oh wow, like I did something. And I look back and I'm like, wow, like here.
Well, at that
Yeah,
point in your
it was so
development, of course it's going to be a big deal to you. I mean, obviously now
yeah.
hindsight with
I'm
all your
like,
experience and whatnot, I'm sure it doesn't. The significance probably isn't as high as it was when you were younger, but
I wonder if I had a bad AT experience, or if I had a bad like experience as a medic. I don't know, like if I would have stayed in, or if I would have like changed MOS, or would have been
right.
where I was at, now. Um, but then those aren't really all that serious. Of course, like when you get into like working
Hmm.
in a city hospital in an ICU, you're gonna have like definitely like
Hmm.
higher acuity, than that like moment where someone's like, I drink too much soda, like so. Um, and now I just feel kind of burnt out. I'm kind of tired. I'm like, when you asked me that question, I looked at it and I was like, oh, I'm like, I don't know. I think I did it to myself, but also I don't want to do it to like, I also
Right,
don't
right,
like
right. Now, is it that you don't like it now because you've been doing it for so long? You're kind of just burnt out on it. The novelty of it is worn off, or what's the reasons behind you not liking it now? Or maybe when did you stop liking it?
It's, yeah. I don't think I was ever good at it. I don't think I've ever once been good. Like in moments, like I look back, and even Aunt Colleen will be like, I remember I was telling her like a story from overseas, and I was like thinking of all the things that I screwed up and all this stuff. And she's like, "Are you listening to yourself? Like nobody goes through that. Like that is wild to me that you experienced that." And I was like, I was like, "Oh yeah, I guess that is kind of like a heart stopping
That's
moment." But
sorry, and that's what blows my mind, because I don't think you realize it, and obviously because you're in the shit more, so it's a normalcy to you. But when you're talking to Aunt Colleen or you're talking to me about it, I'm kind of blown away. I'm like, how do you get up in the morning and put your shoes on? It's a lot. It's a lot to mentally digest. And I'm wondering because you pack away so much of it, is it your subconscious kind of coming back to like say, hey, this is actually more than what you think it is,
I don't, and I've been thinking about that on and off because I mean, like even recently, everything changes, and I've only been in the ICU for like 2.5 years, so I'm still so new and learning so much. Every day I
Right.
learn something new. And I think that's why I like it, because you're not going to find that on an outpatient working in a dermatology office. It'd be awesome. Should I get free Botox and whatnot? I'm like, and you'd just be like sitting around for 8 hours, like, making appointments and taking blood pressure.
I think you would go freaking mad. I think you would go absolutely bonkers. You have such a sharp mind. Yeah.
Yeah, I would go bananas. I would absolutely.
But boy, that skin would be taut, baby.
Oh, I know, switching, like, you're like, oh, like, let's switch the light angle. I can see the bags in your eyes. I'm like, they're there to stay.
Because it's funny. I mean, we all have it. Everyone has bags under their eyes. And it's one of those things now where I'm hyper aware of anytime I do record when I see someone else do it. Like my Uncle Kent right now, he's doing these real estate videos, and he was shooting the video. His first video was like this, and no light, and you could see every wrinkle, every crack. I mean, you saw it all, and I'm like, I feel like I'm watching an episode of Lord of the Rings, and I mean, everyone has it. It's just the angle. You got to kind of get the angle right, so people don't, I don't know, hone into it, because we're not a superficial world at all.
Yeah, right. Yeah, not at all.
But
not at all.
So now you're in a spot where you said you feel you're not good. Did you ever feel that way when you were in the military, that you weren't good at your job?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, like every time, like, so the most that you can do is like train. And when I say I don't do good, like, I mean, I'm getting better, in terms of like what needs to occur or what needs to happen in like a moment. And I'm very supported at work, so I have that going for me. But I don't ever feel like, I don't know, there's some people out there that like get a rush on the adrenaline, and the rush is definite, but some people might find it addictive. I don't know how anyone would be addicted to adrenaline. Now, there's certain things that I would enjoy, like I love roller coasters. There's certain things that I love, and I think just because of like prolonged exposure to moments of adrenaline rushes, so like like if I was just to go to an office job, I don't think I would do well. I'm like, it's a little too slow for me. But there's times when I don't like that. I don't thrive for it. It's not like I'm seeking it out at work. I want to go in. I want to be able to just kind of like chill. And a lot of times too, I feel like, I don't know, like it becomes muscle memory after a while, and maybe I'm there, but not quite, I don't feel nail bitey like I used to. I don't feel like that, but, there's things like when a patient's crashing in front of you, you're like, what now? Like, this is happening. I've actually said the words, we're losing him, I don't like those, I don't like those moments, those moments are awful.
And I can imagine extremely fatiguing. I mean, that's the one thing with those people that chase that adrenaline, is it crashes you super, super hard.
Yeah. And it's crazy because like, then to say that I'm not good at it, I don't know in terms of like resiliency. Like that night I went home and I cried for like 2 weeks over that moment alone. Like it's kind of jarring. I don't like those moments. But that's not to say that I can't be present in that moment and I can't do my job in that moment, like the focus. I just don't like them. I don't like those moments.
Well, it sounds like you're in a perfect career.
Yeah. I know. I was like, and even like when I have good shifts, I'm just like, I think I should be a writer. I don't know. Like, it's just like what midlife crisis feels like.
So I kind of want to switch and pivot real fast from your experience within the medical field and military to your social media. And it's funny to me because you're a vet and usually people with military backgrounds tend to lean, I would say not everyone, but they are more conservative. And I feel like you have this, you toe this line, because I feel you are very conservative about certain things, but also progressive with some other things. What has your attention? What is it that when you see it, you have to kind of put voice to it on your social media, or just, you know?
Oh, in terms of like what I feel like I need to put voice to is definitely like police reformation. I think that 1,000%, only because I know people who I've served with that do have ties to like police, like
Mm-hmm.
first responder jobs. And some are great guys. And then there's some that
Mm-hmm.
are kind of questionable. Some that I've always got along with, no issues. But then I hear stories about, it's stuff like that. And then I'm like, wow, they're wearing a badge. And then you see on their social media the shit they're posting. And you're like, I don't feel comfortable with that. I
Mm-hmm.
don't
Mm-hmm.
like that. And so, and I even was having a conversation. I was talking to a man who he was doing bedside vigil as
Mm-hmm.
his mother was passing. And so I had her on my assignment. And so, and like she's sleeping, so he and I were chatting. And I made the point, I'm like, during that push after 9/11, like the floodgates opened for recruiting, right? So they widened that. It used to be kind of tight. You used to have like a certain GPA and like certain things to get into the military. After 9/11, and they were doing the push into those invasions, the invasion of Afghanistan and the invasion of Iraq, they really loosened up those restrictions for joining, for enlisting. And so now, depending on who those people were, they get out, they do one tour. They probably weren't as stable as you'd like that person to be. And we all have our issues, mind you, right? But then they go and they deploy, they come back, and then they get a job as a cop, because those vets have preference to that. Um, they get onto firefighters, and a lot of people, there's like a really young generational movement in terms of being aware, like aware at least at first responders, and I agree with that because I know some of these people that got out got jobs as COs or police, and I'm like, that's kind of, and I've never had an issue with them, but I've seen how they fly off the handle. I've seen how they yell, and I'm like, I don't know if that's like the right thing. And I've flown off the handle before, and I'm like, but that's why I am not a police officer. I don't even want to be an ICU nurse anymore, like I'm done. But yeah, so I think as far as what's being heard on my social media, I always like tell people like I'm a vet. And you can, put me in as a blue collar first responder too, as far as like, because there's like nurses are kind of
Right.
part of this like culture where, like the firefighters and the police officers and the nurses all are like COs are all like in this group together weirdly because they're kind of like the blue collar
Mm-hmm.
workers of like society that's not like construction or labor intense, it's more like it's like in that
Mm-hmm.
middle path,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, do
Anyway,
you
so
feel that one of the solutions would be to tighten some of those restrictions that were let loose when those invasions happened? I mean, has that happened yet in
yeah, they do it, but like that doesn't change the fact that someone has a
Mhm.
DD 214, that doesn't
What is
matter,
that what is
you
that?
could
What
have
is
like
that?
some joke or like a separation from duty. It could be an honorable
Got it. Got it.
discharge, so when you have these restrictions, that doesn't really, and you can tighten those restrictions after the fact, but that person's already in. So, yeah. And unless they have like anything, and sometimes they turn out to be great people. I mean, like even my older brother, totally turned his life around. I totally believe that. But I don't think these people turn their lives around. I think they just give handed more and more opportunities. So there is no lesson learned from poor behavior or violent behavior or questionable behavior. So I tell people, do not blindly place people on pedestals just because of their job, and I appreciate when people are like, oh, thank you for your service, and oh, but I always get wary, like, oh, let me buy this for you. No, no, no. And I'm like, I don't like that attitude because I feel like there's people that are questionable in the service. I don't like the attitude of just blindly,
Think that everyone's
you know,
an angel who wore a uniform.
yes, that's a very, very dangerous.
Yeah, that's a great observation. And I think as a civilian, it's hard for us to raise that question without having that your experience, because it's like, okay, well, what the fuck, you're a civilian, you haven't seen what we've seen, you haven't, been where we've been. It's like, so we kind of shrink, I think, to that. So it's almost up to that group to take the charge and monitor their behavior a little bit more. I don't know.
100%. I feel like, so when body cams for police officers was a thing, I feel like those that were trying, like, railing against it, I'm like, you're telling on yourselves. Like, I mean, like, for all the things that you're like, oh, he said, she said, and this is bullshit. Wouldn't you want video for yourself to show that you were right? The people that railed against it knew that there's corruption going on, and they don't want to, like, bring a focus to it. I think that's that's telling in and of itself. There's needs to be, and I'm not ripping on all police officers, and I'm not ripping on all veterans. What I'm saying is that reformation needs to occur. I don't know the answers, but obviously to say that the system isn't corrupt, I mean, it's wildly
and if you
inaccurate.
look at that system and those lawsuits that are put upon police officers that maybe made a wrong choice, it's the dollar amount that goes with those settlements is astronomical. I mean, when you see, for example,
Yep. And the taxpayers pay for it. So, like, the citizens are getting harassed, and then they sue, but then the taxpayers turn around and pay for that $1 million lawsuit. The cop is still rehired. I think they really need to reform the unions of police officers too. Those unions are
yeah,
ruined
it's
police
it's the whole situation is very interesting, and yeah, I feel the same as you do in regards to the body cameras, and I'm sure a lot of city governments were a little apprehensive about that, because you look at those lawsuits that were settled for millions and millions of dollars, and they're like, oh boy, now we're going to have all this other evidence that could potentially lead to more lawsuits and more taxpayer dollars going to those settlements. So yeah, that's a slippery piece of soap there. But I have one little section for my questions, and I have to be careful with this one because I don't want to make you feel uncomfortable in terms of stories and what stories you would be willing to share, and more in particular, crazy stories that's either happened to you in your military. Now, you don't have to talk about anything that's happened combat wise. I mean, it could be someone dropping a helmet on their foot or something, or something that happened in your now present occupation within the medical field. Is there anything that has happened to you that made you kind of laugh, or maybe changed your perspective in some funny, weird, wonky way?
made me laugh or changed my perspective.
That I'm sure the 90-year-old man at the beginning of our podcast.
Oh yeah.
I'm sure. I don't think he probably changed your perspective in any possible way. But it's interesting because sometimes you have some. I mean, you work the graveyard shift, so I think in the day, not that you don't get crazy experiences with or people going through stuff during the day, but at night, I think you see a whole nother realm of human behavior and incidents. I send a lot of stuff to you on Instagram because
Oh yeah, that was like, so my very first, like, civilian nursing job was in a nursing home. That full moon is for real. That sundowning is for real. Oh yeah. And actually, it's not so bad now, being in the ICU, because a lot of people are just, like, intubated and sedated. They're like, they're not very chatty right now, but definitely the general medicine floor, where we'd get a lot of, like, geriatric psych. We would get, like, the ODs, so then they're on there, like, because they're withdrawing and stuff. So, um, yeah, so got a mixed bag of a lot of different types of
Yeah.
psych. And that geriatric psych, man, that stuff is so real. It is
I
wild.
remember
Yeah.
one time, so I've done a lot of delivery driving in my life, and I was working for Postmates in LA. This was like when I first started, and I had an order to a delivery to a psych unit, and I thought it was to a nurse or something like that. And I get up there, and they direct me to the room, and I was like, oh, okay. And you're walking down the corridors, and you're seeing some interesting human life walking about. And then I get to the room, and it's this person who has they've been scratching their skin, and so they've got all of these open wounds, and they've had bandages on some areas. I mean, it's everywhere. And I think I had gotten them
Mm.
like four 2-liter things of cherry Coke, and it was just a very random thing.
Mm.
And I remember that experience being like, wow, they really need to have some limitations on this delivery app because this is pretty intense. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I could tell you stories. Stories. I don't have like funny good stories from the ICU all that often. I have like kind of wild, like, oh my
Right.
God, can you
Right.
imagine? But most of my funny stories are definitely from like the nursing home and from general medicine.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. There was we had a woman, and I can't give too much away because of like HIPAA, but she was older, and her son was very appropriate, but he was a working man, and she had some dementia, but otherwise physically very healthy, very very spry, and but she was like a fighter. This one, yeah, she was just like, oh, she's not playing, you know. But at one point, we actually had her in locked leathers, right? And when we have her in locked leathers, like we have to notify the family, like, hey, she's getting a little wild. We have to have her in locked leathers. Security comes up, does the locks. They have the key. Anytime that we have to do nurse care and we have to call security to be present. So it's a full procedural thing, right? And I'm like, and the security are like police officers that MGH has on site, and so they locked her in the locked leathers. I don't know how she managed to do it, but we're at the nursing station, and I have eyes on the room, and I don't know where she got the coat or the hat. I think she grabbed them from patient in bed B, but somehow she managed to get herself out of those 4-point locked leathers, and she had a hat on and a jacket, and like she came out of the room, and like sad to say, like she went towards the closet and not off the unit, like, oh God, like, and she obviously she's not there, but like she was there enough to like, I'm gonna escape. And she looked, and I'm like, she was acting like she was like some stranger in the subway, but I'm like, lady, you're like you're in the hospital, like, you tell us that you don't stick out like a sore thumb around here. Like, that's the closet. Where are you going?
I
Like,
could see you being in mid conversation with somebody with your head in your hand, just kind of all of a sudden that catching your eye. Yeah.
like, what the hell? Like, how
You know,
like, I mean, like, you're
yeah,
so close.
yeah.
If you would
That
just
damn closet got you.
away.
With all the experiences that you had, and this will be kind of my final question, I guess. And I know you said you'd be content potentially maybe being a writer. Would you ever be interested in transferring some of the experiences you had, or being inspired by some of the experiences that you've had to put it in some kind of form of writing? I don't even know what kind of writing you would do. Novel, screenwriting, short story.
Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, I'm definitely interested in doing that. And like, there's times when I'm like, oh, I could totally have like, you know, hours of material for like a silly comedy, like, or something. But then like when you get to sit down, I'm like, I really only know like one or two funny stories, and then it's like craps out from there. Like,
Yeah.
oh shit. And then you're like, I gotta make some stuff
well,
up,
yeah,
but
that's the fun. That's the fun in it, I suppose. But it's interesting
yeah.
because I love writing, and we've talked about writing a lot. And God, I know so many writers who shuffle their feet, and
Yeah.
it's hard because I feel like there's a lot of great writers that have yet to been discovered because of the great procrastination. It's like
I know. Well, and it's easy now. Like, I think I could just write like a novella on like this is how you do tourniquet and like sell it on Amazon,
Yeah.
like self-publish, and then I'm sure like, somebody would like pick that up and be like, oh, this is how you do tourniquet, and like
I would be one of your customers because that sounds very interesting to me.
Really? Like, I was like, I can do that. I'm sure that would sell something.
Yeah, like especially for people in my position, new parents, learning how to do all these medical procedures and I'm like, yeah, man, I'll freaking buy all the ebooks or whatever to teach me how to, be better in those situations, Yeah. Or you could just video record you doing one of the CPR classes because boy, oh boy, the ones that we went through, it's just like it's like watching paint dry. You're kind of like, oh, come on, just give me a little like a Red Bull before you record this thing to, I don't know.
It's tough when you're watching some of the. I mean, like those videos have definitely gotten a lot better. I remember like I don't know when I was. I think I was like training like my first time at Fort Sam Houston. But they showed us and they're like, now scan for blood, and you're like, oh look, and like they're like, for the record, you're gonna see the blood. Or you're gonna have a big inclination of where that blood has come from. Like it's not gonna take you. Please don't stay on it for 10 seconds like that. Moments.
Yeah, bring out your magnifying glass. Where is the blood? Yeah.
Oh,
it's spraying in the face.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's dead. Yeah, it's kind of like it reminded me of. It's not related at all, but it was. We're at this point now with Henry where he kind of controls his pee a little bit better. But I got caught off guard this morning. He got me good. I finished lathering him up with his little tummy tuck. He's got very, very dry skin. And I was just kind of focusing on his foot, this little part of your foot. It gets really dry right there. So I'm kind of lathering it up and yeah. It's funny too because it's like a little wild hose. It just it goes. Oh yeah, wow. Multiple times. Yeah, so it's a real thing. I always thought people who got peed on by their kids were I was like, oh, okay, come on, you're embellishing a little bit. No. It's a whole lot of pressure coming out of that little hose.
That's crazy. Yeah, I mean, like I've heard of that too, but I mean, I have two.
Your cats aren't peeing on you.
That's too much.
I did see one of your cats walk by there. He nonchalantly passed by, and I love that about cats.
Yeah.
They don't care about anything. They're just like, well, it's cool. You're doing a pod.
I'm just gonna put my butt in your face and see if that, like, if you're like, hey, what's going on? Are you there? I'm like,
hey, I'm sure they get excited when you come home from a shift, though. I'm sure they like jump up into your bed and say, hey, how's it going? Where's the food?
They do, yeah, they do get excited. But yeah, I don't know, like how you new parents do it. Like even like I'm always tired at work, and there's new moms at work, and they're going into work overnight. And I'm like, God, I don't know.
It's not too bad. I don't know. It's like anything. You get used to it. It's and luckily I'm in a situation where I have a really good partner to balance the workload. So when you have that, I mean, there's people I think who I'm most impressed by is single moms who are breastfeeding and doing everything else. I can't even imagine. I mean, yeah. When we learned that breastfed babies wake up more, is your baby sleeping 5 hours through the night? At month 3, it's like, no, that doesn't happen for breastfed babies because their metabolism is burning that milk faster than formula, and that's why those formula fed babies, which is fine. I mean, I was a formula fed baby, but those proteins are a little bit more dense, so the baby stays a little bit more satiated and therefore sleeps a little bit longer. So. Then there's Henry who, has our metabolism and it burns through that like in 2 hours. And he's like, woo, time to eat, 2 a.m. So, it's gotten a lot better.
Oh my God. She must be so.
I'm not going to complain to someone who works the graveyard shift. Come on.
No, yeah, but like, I don't have anybody feeding off of me either. Like. I mean,
Yeah.
it's kind of sci-fi.
Yeah, it burns.
I mean,
It's crazy. So
reality,
Minton was doing some research, and she says it burns 700 to 800 calories a day breastfeeding.
yeah. Oh yeah. People say skinny. Look at Aaron's wife. I mean, like
That's
really.
and she's in great shape. Well, and it's funny. So there was a moment. Oh, this might be TMI. Minton might not like this, but she was saying my butt is getting flat. What is that about? All of a sudden, my butt is getting flatter. And being her, she did some more research, and her body is pulling some of that fat from her butt because it's I guess it's good for neuronal development for babies. So when it's making that milk, it needs that in order to give that. And I'm just like,
wild.
Also, it's been, I don't know what the weather has been there, but it's been pretty hot here, and he hasn't been eating as much during the day. So we learned that babies tend to not feed as much when it's super hot, and also breast milk gets watered down a bit more for them, so they stay hydrated. I'm just like,
Wow.
the female body is freaking badass. I mean, I don't know what the male body is doing over here, but it's not doing half as much as what the female body does. We're just sitting over here doing nothing. So anyway, I kind of found it interesting. All right, man, I'm gonna let you go, but I appreciate you. I know you're doing this after. You worked last night, right?
No, actually, I slept, and then I slept some more, and this is why I'm so lucky not to have children right now. I mean, like, I don't think I ever will, ever. So I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna nap. Like,
damn it, I'm taking a nap, and it's happening right now. Well, hey, you should take a nap after this because you can. Anyway, I love you. I hope we can do this again. There is a point in the future where I'd love to do. I'd love to have you, maybe Aunt Colleen, maybe Aaron, have a little trifecta going on. I think that'd be kind of interesting.
That would be awesome.
Yeah,
would love that.
Especially because I know you way more than I know Aaron, and this would be.
Oh yeah, Aaron's psyched about he got that new job in Idaho.
And I've been kind of reticent to talk to him because I know he's principal, so he's got a whole friggin' truckload of responsibility on him right now. But he has responded with interest in doing this, but I'm not going to talk to him until he's kind of above water, so to speak, from all of his responsibilities. But anyway. That'll be for another time. I will let you go. Kick your cats for me lovingly, and I'll talk to you later.
All right, sounds good. Bye. Love you.
Hey, thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. Hey, if you haven't already, why don't you go ahead and subscribe or maybe leave a rating or review. The choice is up to you, but it would be appreciated. Until the next episode, ciao.